stress affects all of us and all of us in different ways and at different times. Everyone is human. There are red flags that we can look out for. Often we will miss those. If I go towards a set of electric doors and they don't open fast enough for me, I know that I'm rushing around too much. It's a really clear sign for me, like, you need to slow down. It is simple things like taking a break, and that means changing your environment, getting away from the computer, getting away from the office. As the stress increases and we go over the curve, the performance rapidly drops.
Good afternoon, Claire. Thank you for joining me today. Today, we're going to be talking about stress, which for anybody in the startup scene has to be a topic of great interest. Claire, do you want to talk me through your journey, how you came to the skills you have, and why this subject?
Yes, lovely. I'm Claire Harris. I'm a chartered health psychologist, and I've worked in mental health for over 25 years now. I specialise in health psychology, which is that kind of links between physical and mental health. I've always been interested in that kind of holistic side of humans. Some of my early books I remember buying links between sort of biology and stress and how the mind works with the body. I've always been interested in that kind of thing. My first job after qualifying was working at Cambridge University in research. I really enjoyed that, but it was in a clinical setting, and I knew that kind of wasn't really where I wanted to be. And following that, I saw a job advertised as the lead for promoting mental health awareness in public health within the NHS. And I moved across to that role, which felt kind of fitted with me. It kind of felt like I wasn't working. I've also had my own experience of mental illness. So I've had depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder after my second birth, unfortunately. But I have that kind of understanding of both sides, which I bring to my work now. So I run a training business called Promote Mental Health. I work with organisations where we upskill people within the workplace to look after themselves, try to stay resilient, manage stress. I also work with managers and teams so that people can look after each other and signpost to services as well. So it's been quite a long journey, and I'm really happy where I am now and doing a lot within the workplace.
One of the key things investors are looking for is resilience and the ability to cope with the pressures of that journey. Why do early stage founders, why do entrepreneurs need to understand stress?
I think it's so important because I know a lot of founders will feel that they're probably quite resilient, but stress affects all of us and all of us in different ways and at different times. So everyone is human. So even if we are feeling resilient, we're still going to have that vulnerability at points with stress. And we've got something known as the stress container, which is a really important and helpful model to help us all understand how stress functions and how stress can build up and cause a bit of a problem. So we all have a container, and this varies in size depending on how resilient we are and how vulnerable we are. So if we are looking after ourselves well, if we've got good support networks, if we haven't got a lot of stress going on, we're going to have quite a big container with quite a lot of capacity. If we're more vulnerable, and that can be for a number of reasons, it can be for life circumstances, it can be certain periods within our lives, what's happening outside of work. Sometimes we're more vulnerable and that container's smaller. So our capacity to cope with stress is smaller.
On every startup journey, there's going to be points when that starts to come into effect, right? When there are technical challenges and the runway is getting a little bit shorter. And so all of those pressures are building, and the founder, the CEO, they carry all of that load.
Yes. Yeah. So what we do with this model is initially it's really thinking about what size that is for you at the moment. That's going to change depending on where you are in your journey. Also, all of those things that are happening for that person, whether they're positive or negative stresses, those are things that are coming into the container. So we see it as a container with water as the stress coming into the top. And even those things that are positive, events where, we've got additional funding or we're working towards an exciting target, those things are still very stressful, even though they're a positive event. So those are everything that's going on at work, but also outside of work and life pressures. That's all going into the container at the top.
How does this affect our performance? Because this is a system in every human being, right? So does it have an impact on the way that we work? Does it have an impact on how we run a business?
Yes, so it's going to have an impact on performance. it's really interesting that we have for performance versus level of stress, we have a kind of classic bell-shaped curve. So at that lower level, we're going to perhaps be performing. If we've got a little bit of stress, we need a certain amount of stress to get us going, to get us up and working. That ultimate level, we use certain higher levels of stress, we're going to be performing well, we're at our optimum performance. But very quickly, we go over that curve if stress goes on for too long, or we've got too much pressure, or it outweighs our ability to cope. And very quickly, we can come over that curve and come down the other side where we possibly hit burnout, we may get physically unwell, or we can experience problems with our mental health on that other side. And a key thing at the top of that model is that there are red flags that we can look out for. Often we will miss those. So we kind of end up at this burnout stage, and it's not the worst place to be. It's hard to get back from there, but we can look back with retrospective and say, okay, some of those red flags I've missed. Actually, I was doing too much. I was rushing around a lot. I had too many things at once. And that's how I've ended up here.
I think that's a crucial thing to understand, particularly when you're in the startup space, because the pressure is always there. So it gets very normalized. So you get used to living at the top of that curve, and then you slip over to the far side of it without even realizing what's happened, unless you're very alert to these red flags.
So I think we were saying in a previous chat, one of mine sounds a little bit odd, but I know if I go towards a set of electric doors and they don't open fast enough for me, I know that I'm rushing around too much. It's a really clear sign for me, like, you need to slow down. And that's when probably I'm getting to that point of top of that graph, and it's a red flag for me, definitely.
I think it's very relatable. I think we all have these moments where we go, okay, this is so frustrating. And then you look back on it and you go, perhaps my frustration there wasn't entirely reasonable. What other red flags should we be looking for, or what could we be paying attention to?
Yeah, so I think for individuals, and it's important, if we know our team really well, then we can look out for changes in behaviour. So often it's a change in behaviour in ourselves or a team member. It may be that person's struggling to make decisions. It may be that they're being a little bit more withdrawn. They may also have changes in eating and sleeping habits. So we're quite often well aware of our kind of physical health, much more than our emotional state. If we notice that we're starting to find it hard to go off to sleep, or waking in the night, or waking early, after our sleep patterns change dramatically. If our appetite changes, some people eat a lot more food when they're stressed. Some people eat less and their appetite disappears. So it's watching out for those types of changes in behaviour in ourselves and other people, that we can pick out those red flags.
We've been talking about stress for leaders, but it affects the whole culture of the team, and creating the culture is important.
What we're talking about here are high pressured workplaces as well. Often quite a small team, a kind of top-down model. That person at the top has got a responsibility in terms of supporting their team and what type of culture that team has. If they're role modeling positive behaviors, then the team are also going to do the same. So if they're, doing extended hours to meet a deadline, fine. But if, there's a lot of pressure and we're not sleeping and we're doing that regularly, the rest of the team are going to have that expectation that, our team leader or our founder is doing that. Maybe there's an expectation we do the same. So the other side of that is role modeling positive behaviors in terms of, I'm going to work late tonight just to meet this deadline, and then we rein things back a bit. So it's modeling that for the team.
It's an old truism in software development that crunch doesn't work, because it works a little bit for a few weekends or maybe a couple of weeks. But if you start running that pressure, then you make more mistakes when you're programming. So there are more bugs to fix. So you spend more time fixing bugs. And in fact, the more you crunch, the worse the problem becomes. And I think it generalizes to stress and pressure inside the organization, doesn't it?
Yes, I think I agree. So it's really important, if we come back to the stress container model, what we have in that model at the bottom is a tap, and that's our ability to let out the stress at the bottom. And in an ideal world, if we're doing that equal to what's coming in at the top, or more than what's coming in at the top, we kind of stay in balance. So learning thinking about what stresses are going on. If that pressure is always going to be high, what are the methods we can put in place to, reduce that stress or manage that stress? We can only work at a certain level of pressure, going back to that curve, for a certain period of time. True definition of resilience is working on a task, coming away and reflecting, resting, and having another go, a kind of stepped approach. If we do that pushing through, then we often crash, and then it's much harder to come back, like you said, and we're going to make more mistakes.
Something that was a very strong learning experience for me was knowing when to step away from a problem, go and do something else for a while, and then come back at it with fresh eyes. As a software engineer, it's very easy to spend a week kind of plugging away at one particular approach to the problem, and then realize you could have solved the whole thing in 5 lines of code if you just formulated it slightly differently.
And I think that comes back to those methods of coping and those strategies. So it is simple things like taking a break, and that means changing your environment, getting away from the computer, getting away from the office, even if that's a walk outside, fresh air, light, particularly at this time of year. We've got shorter hours in the day, and getting outside, getting into nature, getting some exercise. And often when we physically move ourselves from the workspace, some of those things, we solve problems. We come up with answers when we're not crunchy.
Let's talk about coping strategies. How can you keep your stress under control? What can you do?
So there was a research study in 2008 where they looked at 400 research papers and tried to pick out the top things for managing well-being. And this was done by the New Economics Foundation. They came up with the 5 ways to well-being. And these are 5 things that we know are really good for maintaining well-being and also helping people to feel better if they're struggling. So the first one of those is connecting. So spending time with other people, having, authentic connections with others, and whether that's within your workplace team, which you need to have, but also outside of work as well. That was something that was really, really challenged during the pandemic because we had to find other ways of connecting. So that was something that people realized how valuable that was to connect with others. The second one is taking notice. So this comes back to being able to be present as well. And I think if we're absorbed in a project or something within the workplace, we're very good at doing that. We've got to make sure that we're not too absorbed and it takes over. But focusing on the current moment is really important, because if we're worrying about what's coming ahead, if we have got deadlines, if we have got pressure, that can generate anxiety. If we're going over mistakes and things from the past, that can lead to low mood and depression. So it's very much about taking notice of what's going on in the present moment. That's number 2. The third one was around physical activity, so being active. So we know a lot about that now in relation to mental health. So that is moving the body in whatever way we can, getting outside, doing exercise, walking. Different types of tasks work for different people. So that activity is important. The other one is learning. So in these projects where people are making mistakes and learning, that's actually beneficial for their well-being. It's going to create resilience. So anywhere where we're learning new skills is really, really important as well. And the 5th one, giving, is the other one. So that's whether we're giving our time or our energy or emotions to somebody else. So you'll often find that if we're doing that in any way, whether that's a team member or someone with our family or with friends, it makes us feel really good about ourselves. It's really good for well-being. So that was the 5th criteria that they found from this research study that can be helpful.
One of the nice things about working in a startup is that they're typically small teams, very close teams, because you're working closely with people that you understand and you trust. There's a great opportunity there for an awful lot of these behaviors.
Yes. Lots of these can be done together. So, if you're getting outside and you're getting active, I know a lot of organizations now have walking meetings. So we find that the conversation flows if we're moving and we're stood side by side rather than sat in a kind of formal setting. So by doing that, you're getting some physical activity, you're connecting with somebody else, you're in nature. So you're kind of ticking all the boxes. So there were lots of things, like you said, in a small team as well, where we can make sure we're supporting people with these actions.
The other thing that I think is very interesting is that you talked about the stress benefits of learning. But also learning is fantastic for retention, because many people, when they come into a role, particularly if you're going into a startup, you're doing it because you want to be challenged and you want to grow. Yeah. So the more the business creates a culture of learning, the more you're keeping that resource and that enthusiasm.
I think that's the learning is particularly important in this setting, definitely.
If you've got a team that you can trust and rely on, then when that pressure's on, you've got the support that you need, and that's making your own stress burden so much more manageable.
Yes, I think that comes back to your workplace culture and your team culture again. If you've got a culture where people feel, there's trust, they're valued, there's psychological safety. So people feel that there is space there so that they are free to make mistakes. They're not going to be discriminated again or get into trouble for making mistakes. They can come back from those and we can learn from them. It's that kind of positive mindset in terms of that safety that the team feels, and they can all rely on each other.
Always thought that mistakes that have happened in a lot of ways are the most boring thing in the world because there's nothing you can do about them. They have happened. There's no changing them. What you can change is the future. And then it's all about learning from what you've done. And that's a very different conversation, but it changes that paradigm of stress and pressure. So you're always constantly learning and you're bringing the team with you as you go.
Yeah. And I think, that growth mindset, they're teaching that a lot more now in education. We learn the greatest things by making mistakes. That's how we learn. It's how we move forward. And, we need in the workplace, the team have to feel safe enough to be able to do that and to be able to speak up and be authentic as well.
Absolutely. You have to find that space where you can do the thing, but you don't know that you can do the thing, so you don't know that you can do it without errors. And then the moment that you succeed, you've learned something and your skill level's improving. But it only happens if you've got that freedom to, okay, if I make a mistake, it's going to be okay, we can manage it. Otherwise, you keep people in their least productive zone, right?
Yeah. We want to keep people at the top of that curve, performing well at their best level. And we, to do that, we need to put the coping strategies in, the self-care, managing the stress, and having that positive culture.
It's been absolutely fascinating. And I think there are many tips there that I wish I'd known years ago and flags that I will be looking out for in myself. I will certainly be paying attention to every pair of automatic doors that I walk up to.
There you go. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much.